Welcome back to ReadingBear. Today, we will take a look at some new confession stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, I used to go into random homes in my neighborhood when the occupants weren't home. This was in the mid-80s when security wasn't like it is now, and also, lots of families didn't even lock their doors. The first time I ever did this was when I was riding my bike in the neighborhood and saw a front door of a home wide open. I peeked in and said, "Hello," just to see if someone was home. No one answered. I stood in the living room just scanning the area and got spooked and left. After that day, I was hooked on it. I would wait for people to leave and enter through whichever door, window was open and would walk around. I never stole anything, but I did open drawers, closets and went through personal belongings. I once found a wad of money rolled in up a sock. I took the money and sock and put it in the next drawer over. I felt like I needed to leave a mark, so I ended up moving dishes in cabinets. I switched the cups with plates and moved utensil drawers to another spot in the kitchen. I did this in about 8 or 9 homes until people started talking and getting suspicious, and of course, people started locking their doors, including our family. I stopped after that. Someone did call the police, but nothing ever came of it since nothing was stolen. I haven't trespassed in anyone's home, but I do switch things around in other homes when I'm invited over. The next story is titled, I was arrested, then covertly stole my records and destroyed them. As a young teenager, a friend and I were charged with shoplifting over $100 worth of lingerie from a large department store, and I was permanently banned from all of their stores. Because I was so young and wasn't caught committing any other crimes, I was able to have the criminal charge expunged from my record when I turned 18. It is relevant to the story that, in my later teens, my dad legally changed his last name, and therefore so did I. When I was beginning my adult life and looking for a job, I applied to a different location of the store, because, well, I needed a job and I was applying to a bunch of places. I did not expect to be hired. But I was. I ended up working at the central location of the chain, where they kept records for all the stores. I worked for loss prevention, catching idiots like myself shoplifting, and learned the obvious mistakes I had made attempting my crime. We also screened all potential new hires to see if they had ever been caught committing a crime at any of the store locations. I learned that I was only hired because I had a different last name than the one I had at the time of my arrest. But I kept worrying that I would be found out and be in trouble. Loss prevention had keys and access to every place in the whole building, and I discovered that I had access to the hard copy records of all shoplifting arrests at every location. This was years ago, before computer databases were used for that kind of thing. One day, when the rest of the team was busy doing something else, I snuck into the room with the records and located the file under my former name. I also found the record of the friend I was with, because my name was mentioned in her file, too, and I smuggled both files out and destroyed them. The next story is titled, I shoplifted over $6,000 worth of clothing in one stint. This was almost 10 years ago. I was a sales associate as a teen at a well-known chain retail skate store. It was a cool job, but my store manager sucked. Just rude and aggressive all the time, bullied the staff every day. I rocked it as a salesperson. I doubled my goals almost daily. Always at least met them. One day, the store manager got our numbers for the quarter. We were a little behind where we should have been, but there were also 2 new associates who weren't carrying their weight. Store manager blamed me for the numbers, and accused me of giving discounts to people and allowing others to shoplift. I had never done either of those things. I was livid. So, one night with a group of 4 friends or so, one of which used to work at the store with me, we came up with a plan to raid the place to give the store manager something to actually complain about. So, I went into my shift on a Sunday morning, knowing the assistant manager would be hungover. I convinced him to take a nap out back and that I wouldn't tell if he let me claim the sales for the day. He didn't care about anything, so it was an easy yes. Cue my friends coming in, acting as customers with their beach bags, as I'm working with regular customers on the floor alone. A customer friend would bring their purchase to the counter to ring out and have the security tags removed, and then immediately go into the changing room and bag it. Bring it to their cars, wait 20 minutes, do it all over again. We all had lists of items we wanted, and I had mine piled on the counter ready to be taken. In 1 hour we completed the list and my friends left. The assistant manager came back from his nap oblivious. I wrapped up my shift and went home. We divided up the clothing and celebrated. Never got caught. I put my notice in the next day, and that was that. Old friend from work told me when the next quarterly report came out after I quit, the numbers were so bad from shrink inventory of clothing missing with no money to show for it, the store manager got demoted. Was it wrong? Yes. Would I do it again? No. Do I regret it? Not even a little bit. The next story is titled, I leave fake parking tickets on cars that deserve real ones. I ordered a batch of them off Amazon and leave them wherever. Sometimes if nobody is around I make an effort and fill in all the details on it to freak them out before they get to the bottom and see it's a fake. Sometimes I just write something dumb in the comments and leave the rest blank. I've left them on cars at my university that aren't technically illegally parked, and on cars that are parked in no parking zones at my grocery store. I especially do it when somebody is parked in a handicap spot that's not supposed to, no plate or hang tag. Local laws are sketchy on this. Some would argue it's misrepresenting itself as official and therefore illegal, but at the bottom of them they say they're fake. So others would argue the worst they could get me on is littering if the police actually cared enough to do something. The next story is titled, I sold a plastic bottle cap to a mentally handicapped kid when I was 8. At the age of 8, I decided I wanted to make money for whatever reason goes through the mind of a kid. There was this mentally impaired kid living in my street, who was always very nice to the neighborhood and waved her hand with a big smile to everyone. She could barely talk intelligibly but could understand simple words. So one day, going through the mess of my bedroom, I found a plastic bottle cap. I walked up to the kid and told her it is a very important object and that her parents really need it. Her parents would be really happy to have it. They would be angry if she loses it. Now, for mentally handicapped kids, their parents, their house, their neighborhood is the only world they know. It is the limit of their universe. This is all they got. They are innocent. They cannot imagine what being mean or dishonest is. I told her she needed to give me coins to get the cap. She came back with a bunch of coins in her hand. She looked so happy. She couldn't count, so I took all of it. It has been 20 years now, and I have deep remorses for what I did. Taking advantage of an impaired and innocent child who cannot imagine people can be deceiving. I can imagine her cheering that ridiculous cap, like it's gold. Showing it to her parents because she loves them. The kid has passed away because of her disease and I will never be able to repair what I did. I thought I would buy the cap back from her parents. Whatever cap will do, even if it's not the one I gave her. But it would sound like nonsense to them. Too long a story to explain. They probably don't even know this ever happened. But I do. The next story is titled, I hid weed in the principal's office and somehow didn't get caught. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. One of the security guards caught me skipping and took me to the administrator's office. While I was sitting in the lobby waiting to be called into one of the rooms, I overheard him saying I smelled like weed. I had about a half ounce in my pocket and knew they were going to search me. I immediately crumpled up a paper and casually walked into the principal's office, which was empty at the time, and I acted like I needed to use his trash can to throw that paper away. Instead I threw my weed in there, went back into the lobby. They called my name and as expected they searched me and found nothing. I took my detention slip and walked away, and once again as I was leaving I crumpled another piece of paper up, walked into the empty principal's office and grabbed my weed. It was a very close call and it would have been bad had I been caught because my parents didn't have a clue that I smoked weed. This was over a decade ago in 2008 and I still think about it. The next story is titled, I entered a stranger's house to avoid a DUI. I live in Australia. Not sure how it works in the rest of the world, but I was on my provisional driver's license as a teenager. We call them P plates, and when you are on that you cannot have any alcohol in your blood whatsoever. I stayed at my mate's place one night and he had some beers to drink. I had two, knowing I had to drive the next day and was gonna stop, but he convinced me to have another, so I did. The next day I got in my car to drive home, and as I was turning a corner there were a couple police doing an RBT, random breath test, and I panicked. I knew full well I'd have a little bit of alcohol in me and that's enough to lose my license for a couple months. I had just left school and gotten a really good job, and if I got a drink driving charge I would have to rely on my parents to drive me there, which wouldn't work out as they both have jobs. I panicked and turned right onto another street. I drove halfway down the road thinking I had gotten away with it, but one of the cars suddenly turned round the corner and blasted the sirens. I pulled over and the cop came to my window. "Cop, can you explain to me why you just avoided an RBT?" Instead of explaining to the cop why and just taking my punishment, I decided to lie. "Me, I wasn't trying to avoid it, I live down here." "Cop, whereabouts do you live?" "Me, just over there." "Cop, well, you don't mind if I follow you and watch you enter your house for proof, do you?" Kinda crapped myself but agreed. He got in his car and I drove into a driveway halfway down the street and walked up to the door. My current plan was to just explain to whoever is at the door what's going on and hope he lets me inside. I walked up and knocked but no one answered. Then I looked over my shoulder at the cop and turned to just open the door and it was unlocked. I walked inside and shut the door. I was really scared for if whoever lived there was gonna walk out and see me and scream, but no one did. I stayed at the door peeking out the window at the cop and he left after about 10 minutes. I waited another 10 minutes before walking down and driving off again with a big sigh of relief. The next story is titled, "On a parking lot I used to work, I would open the gate if they would pay me half the official fee." I used to have this job where you sit around in a little building that controls the gates on a parking lot. It had a window for people to come ask questions if they were lost, etc. I was usually alone in here, and I used to bring my laptop with speakers and just watch YouTube all day, blast music. Walk around the lot, do nothing. Sometimes I drank beers. Best job I ever had. Anyway, the parking costs €10 on this lot, whether you parked for 5 minutes or 5 hours. Which was ridiculous, my justification right here. Sometimes people would come up to my window and ask where they could pay and how much it is. If no colleagues or supervisors were around, I would tell them, "You can pay €10 in the machine over there or give me €5 and I'll open the gate for you." Of course, everyone went with the latter. I didn't do this with everyone, usually only with foreigners or people who appeared lost to make sure no one found out. I think my best on a single day was about €100 to €125. Which is a really nice bonus for a minimum wage job. Unfortunately, I wasn't always alone, so couldn't do it very often. Most of the days I did it I stopped at around €50. I blew most of the money on beers and other nonsense, but I do remember buying €300 Nike Air Jordans that I loved and wore for years. Never got caught. Sorry parking lot. The next story is titled, "I Lie About Having My University Degree and It Got Me a Great Job." I went to an Ivy League university in Ontario, Canada right after high school. My marks weren't great, but they were good enough to squeeze me in. I spent most of my time in university partying rather than studying, but still managed to pass all of my first-year classes. In my second year I skipped a lot of classes and was very lazy with the coursework. My marks were terrible and I failed a couple of my courses. In my third year, about halfway through, I dropped out and got a job landscaping. I did that for a year when I realized it really sucked and I began to regret not trying harder while I was in school. I figured I would apply to jobs that would normally require the degree that I would have gotten. I had spent the few years in school, I was easy enough to make the timeline on my resume make sense, and although I dropped out I had a decent knowledge of the area. The field I was attempting to enter is difficult to start out in and it took a few months of sending applications to get an interview. The company I got an interview with, my now current employer, is an internationally recognized name in the energy sector. I was extremely surprised to get my interview. One of the documentation requirements was university transcripts, and with an hour or two in Photoshop I had my proof of graduation. I sent in the papers with the other required information and never heard anything back describing any problems with my records. I ended up going through 3 interviews in the process and received a position. I have now been working with this company for almost 5 years. They provided all the necessary job training and nobody has ever questioned my education. I entered with a starting salary of $72,500 CDN and received annual raises. Upon hiring me, I was told that the management staff was quite impressed with me through the hiring process and that they usually only hire applicants with minimum requirement of a master's degree. I basically crapped my pants every day while in the interview training process, but now I don't really think about it ever. I didn't tell me university friends I faked having my degree. The only people that know I did this are my parents. The next story is titled, "I plagiarized my entire dissertation and I got caught." It just felt too big, too nebulous. I had no idea where to start. I kept putting it off and putting it off again, with no idea of what to do. I could have asked for help, but I didn't. How pathetic. I thought every other student can manage to write one, but you need help? Just ducking, put your head down and do it. But I didn't. With 24 hours to go, I had nothing. So, I found a dissertation on Google, and I went through and changed it enough that I thought I could get away with it. I didn't. I have a hearing in a few days, and I can't see any likely outcome other than being kicked out with no degree. I haven't told anybody, besides a nice woman on the phone from Samaritans, because I didn't know who else to call. She didn't seem to know what to say though, and I can't blame her. What is there to say? You ducking idiot? How did you not ask anyone for help at any stage? Why are you the only person who can't ducking write their own dissertation? I'm so ashamed. So ashamed. I can't tell my friends. Students have fun at university, but I feel as though there is an unspoken contract that everyone can do so because they are all working hard. I have broken my contract, and I cannot admit it. This shame pales in comparison to the shame I feel regarding my parents. I am dreading telling them more than anything. They have been nothing but supportive my entire life. They are wonderful people. They have given me so much help, sacrificed so much for me to get a good education, and I have spat in their faces. I am ashamed to be their son. The next story is titled, I intentionally broke the work computer so my boss would get a better one. I work in a shop where a computer is required, basically an internet cafe, and my boss, being the cheaper hole he is, forces me to work with a crappy 2008 Samsung laptop with the crappiest specs, so slow and makes my interactions with customers awkward and my job painfully harder than it should be. I've been asking him to get a proper computer for months, arguing that it would benefit him more than me, and it would. His argument is always, this little guy got me to where I am now, he's our good omen. Despite being perfectly capable of buying a PC with decent hardware with his bloody pocket change. Today I had enough, so I just poured water on it, wiped it out and let it dry. To my surprise it would still turn on, but the keyboard is ducked. So, now he's forced to get a better PC. The next story is titled, I blackmailed my uncle some time ago and I really regret. My father is a dick, and so my uncle, my mother's brother, has always been one of my favorite male figures. He's about 13 years older than me, so I saw him as a really cool older brother. He took me to school, played with me, helped me with my homework, went to the pool with me and everything else a little girl could want. But when he was in the middle of the 20s and I was 12 to 13, he started to give me less and less attention, got a girlfriend, was starting to think about having children, and I became really jealous. I always spent a lot of time alone with him and started making small threats whenever he didn't give me any attention when he was babysitting me. I started by saying that if he didn't drop the phone to talk with me or any other thing I wolf tell my mum that rubbed my butt or something minor as it. He seemed very uncomfortable to hear that, and most of the time he paid attention to me. It didn't take long for me to realize that this works very well, and I started using it more and more, making more and more serious threats, including that he had touched my privacy in the pool or made me play doctor with him or ask for pictures. In my head I knew it was wrong, but I didn't understand the seriousness of what I could end up telling my mum, so I really don't know how much he just accepted it or really felt threatened. Anyway, it continued until I was about 14, almost 15. I'm 17 now, he turned 30, got a good job, moved to another city and is really living a good life. But since then he has acted like I don't exist, we never spoken proper again, he never appeared on my birthdays or of any other family child where I could be, and I think he really hates me. I wish I could tell him that I'm sorry and that I love him very much, and that I was jealous and didn't want to lose the only person in the family who took me to do cool things. But I also feel like a piece of crap that would never be able to see him in the eye to talk about it. I don't even know if he would be willing to forgive me, but he is afraid of approaching me thinking that I can do the same again, or he just doesn't want to know about my existence anymore. I really wanted to know what to do. How to apologize. I'm afraid of everything he can say to me if we're going to talk about it. I think it will hurt even more than the silence. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.